Bye un ratito. Oh, I have to put warm water.
Oh, for this? I got it.
It's already clean? Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I just two.
Gotcha.
Thanks,
Gain
Jocelyn.
time.
What?
I'm doing a quick interview with Gudrun, real quick.
Go ahead and do it.
Okay.
I'm going to wash these dishes.
Jocelyn's washing the dishes right now for Gudrun.
Today's chicken day
Today's chicken
for the
day.
monkeys. Sorry.
Oh, you're good, you're good. We understand.
I love mountains too. When I was a kid, we always went up on my first mountain that was over 1,000 meters. There's still a picture. I was 4 years old. Like
Wow.
Austria, you go up the mountains when you live in the countryside. So that's something I miss here. Mountains and being able to look a little bit further.
Yeah.
There you are.
I can imagine.
So flat here. Okay, if you're not going to fight, both of you can be here.
She's like, attention. So, like, how old were you? You said you were 7 years old when you said you wanted to be in the jungle. Like, were your parents outdoorsy, or like, what inspired you?
Well, we come from the countryside, and when I was very small, until we moved to a town, not a big town either. Now I think it's got 40,000 people. But when I was a kid, we lived in a very small village. My father wasn't there because he was studying in Graz, quite far away. He only came at the weekend. And my mother was a teacher because she maintained the whole family and him for studying. So we were more or less the whole day alone. And we just loved to go into the woods. And my mother also inspired us. I always believed in dwarfs and in elves and things like this. And I remember we went with my mother and she said, oh, we're going to leave some gold for the dwarfs. And the other, like this, you know, they like on Christmas trees, this very thin golden strings that you
tinsel.
hang.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we put it near the, there are lots of, if you look in European wood, you know, with the moss, it's called.
Yes.
And old trunks, it really very often looks like a castle.
Yeah.
And with the holes in it, and my mother said, okay, we'll leave something there for the dwarfs. And the next day we went, and there wasn't. What's gone? They had taken it, you know, or we left some sugar for them. And so I love this, and I love to go into the jungle and animals, and not the jungle, the forest only.
Wow.
And so I don't know. I always loved, and as I said, my mother, I brought home. That was also when we still were living in that very tiny village. We lived in the old school. We didn't have a proper apartment, but we could live there because my mother taught there. And I remember later on, she told me, I had forgotten it, that our grandfather sometimes came to watch us because she was busy, and he had to visit. And once he left his cap, he worked in the wood cutting down trees now, and he had this big cap. And he came back, and he didn't notice that I had filled it up with little snakes that I had found. That was the only time he really got angry with me. Yes.
Why did you fill it with little snakes?
Because I was curious. I just wanted them to see. They said I filled up there, and we didn't have. There was one bathroom for everybody. We didn't even have water inside that house. Had to bring it in, and there was a bath tube. And one day the neighbors reclaimed. To my mother, she hadn't noticed it because one day in the week we could use it, and the other day the other families. And I had filled the bath tube up with, how do you call the babies of frogs?
Oh, tadpoles. Yep.
Yeah. So
You filled the bathtub with tadpoles.
So I always brought home whatever animal from small on. Somehow, I don't know why.
When I was
Brought
younger.
home cats and dogs.
Oh yeah, I would bring home turtles. That was my thing, turtles and snakes.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, check this out. Yeah, it's like crazy because I feel like even though we're different ages, different parts of the world, like I'm just relating to you so much right now, and it's kind of weird.
It's kind of nice. It's kind of like seeing a daughter I've never had.
Yeah.
Like this, yeah.
I bet you haven't, like, because you work for the animals, like you don't care about all this. You just want to like, did you start, like, how did you progress from like butterflies to animals?
Because the government started to drop animals here. It was not actually my desire, because I was actually starting with the butterflies, thinking I want to do something for conservation, something for nature. But I don't want to get very attached to the animals, because then I will suffer too when something happens to them. So
Yeah.
it wasn't planned. And then the government controlling the butterfly farm, they came up at the first with the red wakari baby. That's Chavo, they're the best wakari ever. She was incredibly nice, incredibly intelligent. But after 6 years of having her, she started to have epileptic attacks. So I had to, in that time, I actually paid a guy just to take care of her because I didn't want to put her somewhere inside. She was free. So it was a worker who always walked underneath her. When she got an attack, just very similar to human beings, the first thing she did was like smell something. And then she started to turn around, and then she got a cramp, and then she would fall down, and that's when the guy had to catch her. After a few minutes, it passed now. We, made a veterinarian at the time, we tried for years. She lived up to 12 years to find out what was the reason of her epilepsy. There was no pattern at all. Sometimes she had up to 5 attacks in one day, during the night 2, and then there were 2 weeks without nothing. And then again, maybe 2 at a day, and then one day not. And so we never found out why it was. The veterinarian in the end, he said maybe it happened when they shot the mother, and she fell down. She had some kind of injury or a scar inside the brain, and when she was grown up and there was no more space for the brain, that this might have caused the attacks.
Wow.
But we don't really know. And unfortunately, she died. Well, for her, maybe it was the best way of dying, but she could have lived many years more. She was Mother's Day, I remember. It was on a Sunday. I was just having something to eat, and the guy was in charge of. And then he called me, he screamed, and she had Chavo, that was her name, Chavita, fell into the water. It was high water season, and she fell over. There was a very big tree, and the water there was about 8 meters deep. And so the guy started to dive for her. I ran over, I started to dive for her until we finally found her. She had drowned.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was very sad. But in the end, then I thought actually for her, when you have an epileptic attack, you don't feel it.
Yeah.
And so what happens after the cramp practically you have, she fell into the water and then it passed, and the first thing she must have done was underneath the water.
Wow.
So at least for her it was very fast, I think.
Yeah.
And then I also thought, well, what would if she had fallen down and broken her spine or whatever? So, but it was said because she was so special. She liked to jungle. You would give her an egg or a lemon, and she would let it roll up here and down again, and then over and then here. And I had a few videos. I don't know. I have them in an old computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was amazing. She was very nice. But she died. Yeah.
So how old were you when you moved to Peru?
21.
21. And did you came and visited with a friend, and then did you start this sanctuary, this butterfly?
No, when I didn't have any more money, as I'm a social worker, I wanted to do some social work.
Yeah.
And I was living, I didn't have any more money, so I looked for a place. It was in the Nanai River, on this river. And I wanted a place to live outside the city. And there was a family, I didn't speak much Spanish, but I remember they said, yes, you can live there, and you take care of the hens and the pig, because there's only one old Indian who's taking care, but he drinks a lot. And so I moved there, and they took care of the pigs, and it was interesting. And when I was living in the middle of the jungle, I remember, and the guy had a canoe, and I remember I started to go into the jungle, and it was left and right, and taking pictures of the jungle. And then I came out into a lake in the middle of the jungle, and I started to paddle around. And then it got dark, and then I wanted to go home, and I was completely lost. I had absolutely no idea where the entrance was, where I got out. And then I saw a guy with a canoe on the other side of that lake, and I called after him and started paddling, and the guy looked back and started to go off very fast. I followed him, I got out to the river, and on the river I found back to my house. The next day the owners of the house came, because they just had their chickens there, and came from another village to pay the guy who should take care of them and bring the food for the chickens. And then they came and they called me, and they made me understand they had to talk to me. They asked me if I had gone in the canoe the last day, and I said yes. I said, don't do that. One of the village came, and he actually saw you, and when he came to the village, he said, they used to call people here gringos pelacara, skin peeler.
Oh.
Because they said the gringos, when they came here, what they did is kill the Indians and peel them and use the fat to drive their planes. So when he saw me, he said he didn't know if he should shoot or run off. So he decided to run off with his canoe. But then he went to the village and told them that there is a green Belacara in the middle of the jungle. The village was small. The owners had heard it, but well, it was a time when there was not many tourists here.
Wow.
And then I got kind of bored just being there, and I started to make like bracelets and earrings to change them in the village and in town for food. But I'm not a very artistic, talented person. And it's not my interest. So I asked the owners if they knew if somebody would like some help, and they said maybe you could go over to the village on the other side of the river. You go in there and with the canoe, it's maybe half an hour. There's a little village. Maybe the teacher needs you because there are lots of children and only one teacher.
Wow.
And so I went there, I remember, with the canoe, and then I went into the school, and there was this teacher. I didn't speak much Spanish, but I had learned a little bit. And he said, yes, you can help me. Come, next day you come. And I went over the next day with the canoe, and he said, okay, 1st and 2nd degree is yours.
Oh.
And I was, okay, what can I do? Do you have a map? Or
Yeah.
He had a map, but the children had no idea how to read a map.
Oh, wow.
They had one book for primary school that was from the 1st to the 6th degree. That was the one of the teacher. So I ended up actually the first few weeks, what I did is walk with the children, ask them the words. They taught me Spanish, and I taught them to wash their hands after going to the bathroom. I bought some toothbrushes, so we learned from each other quite a lot.
Wow.
And then I started teaching algebra, 1 and 1 is 2, and for 1st and 2nd degree.
Wow.
And then I stayed in that village. In the beginning, for the first year, I had to go there by canoe and came back. And then they made a house for me, so I could live in the village. And then I tried to get some support from Austria for the school and for the children, because there was nothing. And there was an NGO in Austria interested, and actually they gave me a contract for 2 years to make, they called it a development project in that village.
Wow.
So we made a chicken farm. We made 2 wells for drinking water with a tank. And yeah, well, then the project was finished. I'm just smiling now because it was so frustrating. we did this water tank so that they would really have good water. And after those 2 years and everything was done and they had the water and we were using it, and then I left for 2 months to Austria because I had to, my ticket had finished, and I wanted to come back.
Yeah.
So I knew I had to go to Austria and see how I fix my things. And when I came back after 2 years, it was just after the how do you say, the celebration day of that village called San Pedro, St. Peter, St. Paul's in June. And I came in July. And so I came to the village, and my house was still there, and then I noticed there's no more water tank. What happened to the water tank? The water tank is in the church. I said, what does the water tank do in the church? We filled it up with masato. That's yucca beer.
They filled up your water tank with beer?
I mean, later on, I think that was really great. Can you imagine when you have a whole tank and you just have to open there and you can drink yucca beer?
Wow.
Yeah, but in that moment, I was so angry.
I couldn't imagine.
Also because the money, I mean, in the end, okay, came from Austria, but Austrian people also
yeah, they worked
would
for
do
it.
something
Yeah.
else. They worked for it.
Yeah.
So make a project that you have clean water, that your children don't have dowry that often, and then in the end you use it as a tank for yucca beer.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, it taught me about some development project. You cannot expect people from one day to the next to change their point of view and taking your thing that you think are important for them to be important. For them it was important to have a tank full of yucca beer. And
wow. And how old were
They
you?
had sold the water pump.
They sold the water pump.
They had sold the water pump, and not for, I don't know, maybe make a pharmacy or whatever, what they need in the village. No, all of them got really drunk. And that was more or less the money of the...
Wow.
So that was the end of my...
How old were you when you were teaching in the village, and then you.
That was from 21 to 24. And then I fell in love with the guy there in that village.
Mm-hmm.
He was the only man that I could talk a little bit about more things, not only about any fiestas or.
Yeah.
And he was the older brother of one of the kids in school. And so we fell in love, and here people are very close, in Syria at least. They steal. Your uncle might steal, or your brother might steal from you, but on the other hand, they're family, and you have to stay together. And so when we were living together, then my partner and me, the whole day somebody showed up of his family. And once I remember he went fishing far up, and I had to stay because I was teaching. And then the next day, or even the day before he left, his mother sent me his little brother, his little sister, and said, she's going to stay with you. And I said, why should she? So you're not alone. I said, I want to be alone. You know, I'm really happy about it. But people here don't understand that.
No.
So after living there for over a year and all the time having somebody, I mean, when I said I want to be alone, they respected it.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't send the girl over. But anyway, I had too much of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so after a while I said, let's move somewhere else. And we moved up the river to another village. And there I started working in a kindergarten.
Yeah.
I took over the kindergarten, not because I wanted, actually I just wanted to make my house there. Friends of mine were living there. And then the kindergarten had a director that never ever came. If you're a teacher in the villages and you don't really love to do it, you just charge and go and get your money, but you're not there most of the time.
Wow.
And the people said they didn't like it, that they wanted. I said, well, I can do it. And so I started to work without having ever learned it.
Wow.
To be the, how do you say, kindergarten director.
Wow.
Then I tried to learn a bit and did a few courses.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I stayed there. That was when I also got the first animals from people who had killed a big one and then dropped the baby over there.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I stayed there in Jancham, I think, for 6 or 7 years. And then I got the offer to work at the university in
And how old were
Iquitos.
you?
Then I was around 28 or something.
28.
like that.
Okay, wow. So then you worked at the university for 18
And then
years.
I went to the university, exactly, yeah.
And were you working at the university when you started this butterfly farm?
Yes, in the beginning I worked still at the university and I wanted to do something else. Well, actually the idea came to me when I went back to Austria in 1995. I visited my family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, then I was already 31. Yes, no, 10 years here. 1995? Yes, I was 34. I'm from 61, I was 34. And I visited the zoo. I had always visited when I was in Vienna and I was studying. I said I was studying for social work, but I actually would have liked to be a veterinarian. So I always went to the zoo and helped out where I can. And the new attraction in the zoo of Schönbrunn in Vienna is quite famous, a very old zoo, was the butterfly house. And I went in there and I saw quite a few butterflies I knew from here. And I asked him, how do you breed them? And I said, well, we don't breed them. It would be much too expensive to have the host plants. We buy the chrysalis, mostly from Costa Rica and from Malaysia and Indonesia.
Uh-huh.
I thought, well, that would be a good job. Raise butterflies, you don't kill the animals, you know that they're going to live somewhere, people are going to appreciate it, and you can make a living out of it. So that was the original idea of the butterfly farm. Tell me. Somebody's asking for me.
You're good. I have one last question, and it's about conservation, so we can get it on tape.
Just a moment.
Yeah, you're good. I'm going to pause it.